Hey, Wire Monkeys, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Cabling. We're talking design build today. Welcome to the show where we tackle the tough questions submitted by installers, project foremen, project managers, estimators, IT personnel, even customers. We're connecting at the human level so that we can connect the world. If you're watching this show on YouTube, would you mind hitting the subscribe button and the bell button to be notified when new content is being produced? If you're listening to us on one of the audio podcast platforms, would you mind giving us a 5-star rating? Those simple little steps helps us take on the algorithm so we can educate, encourage, and enrich the lives of people in the ICT industry. Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What are you doing? You know I do a live stream on TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, everywhere, where you get to ask your favorite RCDD. You know it's me. Don't try to pretend like I'm not your favorite. Your favorite RCDD questions on installation, certification, design, project management, estimation. I even do career path questions. But I can hear you now. But Chuck, I'm driving my truck at 6 p.m. on Thursday. I don't want to crash and get into an accident. That's okay. I record them, and you can watch them when it's safe to do so. And finally, while this show is free and will always remain free, if you find value in this content, would you click on that QR code right there? You can buy me a cup of coffee. You can even schedule a 15-minute one-on-one call with me, after hours, of course. And we're always looking for corporate sponsorships. So in our crazy world of information communication technologies, there's lots of terms and things that you'll hear bantered about. And one of the things that you'll hear people talk about is design build. Design build. What's a design build model? What is that? So I reached out to a peer of mine who's literally maybe 40 miles that way, right? Where he's actually not too far from me, to come on the show and talk to him, talk to us about it. Now, I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation today. Eric, welcome to the Let's Talk Cabling podcast. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, Chuck. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Appreciate the time.
My pleasure, man. So for the audience members who may not know you, tell us who are you, who do you work for, and let's build some street credibility.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chuck. I've been, obviously you introduced me, right? I work for a company called Power Design. We're a national multi-trade design build contractor based out of St. Pete with projects around the country. We are a full mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and technology design build contractor that really focuses primarily in the technology side on our kind of the MDU space, right? Most of our projects are residential in nature, not your single family homes necessarily, but primarily our project types here are hotels and condos and student housing and apartments and that type of project. So in those types of projects or products, you can imagine there's a lot of technology in those spaces, and they all ride on a similar structure. My team here, my design team here is primarily responsible for designing all of those scopes, all of those technology disciplines, from life safety through some of the sort of nice to have things, right? Like audio, video, and lighting controls and all of that.
So you threw out an acronym out there, and I always make sure that I always define acronyms because people know I'm the acronym challenge king on LinkedIn. Sure. MDU.
Yes.
Multiple dwelling unit.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. So that means apartment buildings, townhouses, hotels, anything other than a traditional single family kind of home. So for those people who heard that acronym didn't know what it meant, there you go. That's what it means. So what is the design build model, and how does it differ from a traditional project delivery system for low voltage?
So if you think about the various types of contracts that are out there, maybe the most common is what we sort of refer to as plans and specs, where there's a consultant who's been hired by the owner to produce a set of documents that are then bid on by a number of bidders, awarded a project, and then the integrator, the contractor, goes and does the installation per those contract documents that were created by those consultants. Maybe it was a single consultant, maybe there were multiple disciplines that got together and created these sets of documents. But the contractor in that case really isn't responsible for the overall design. They're responsible to procure the material, install it per the documents, service it as warranty requires, and that's it. On the other end of that spectrum, you have a contractor who is responsible for all of it, from full design effort all the way through to the warranty, and support process. There's no sort of relying on everybody else to make sure that the design is correct. There's no relying on somebody else to make sure all the parts and pieces are identified. There's no relying on somebody else to make sure that interoperability has been considered. So a design build contractor owns it all.
I would think a design build contractor, from looking at it from a customer's perspective, right? If I'm hiring a design build contractor, I would probably feel more self assured that my network at the end of the day, when I pay, people don't realize how much it costs to actually put in structured cabling. It can cost quite a bit. After I'm going to get a good return on my investment if I had a single point of contact from the design phase through the installation phase through the closeout phase.
Well, that's exactly right. When you consider from the customer's perspective, and that I tend to lead with that mindset all the time is how is my customer looking at this? Maybe off topic, but I think it was Ray Kroc said something like, if you take care of the customer, the business will take care of itself. And that's sort of my mindset all the time when I think about these things from their perspective. If I'm a customer and I want to, if I've got all these options out there, design build is sort of my least risk, because I've put all of my faith in that contractor to make sure that my everything I need is completely covered. There's no going back to, hey, listen, your consultant missed this, or hey, this wasn't in the plan, or hey, this spec was 5 years out of date. All of those things lead to additional costs, delays, problems, inefficiencies, and the point of design build is to reduce or eliminate those added costs. So as a contractor, I'm now taking on a little bit of risk. We'll talk about ways to mitigate those things, but one of the great things about it is not only am I taking on a little bit of risk, but I'm taking on a lot of opportunity that I might not have had before. If I'm just one of a number of people bidding on a job, and it's sort of a level playing field, I've got to get real competitive, and I got to find ways to compete there. As a design build contractor, when I have tight relationships with my customers, I've built trust with them over time, and they know that I'm not there to hurt them, right? That I'm protecting their interest because I'm protecting mine. It's a great working relationship. It's so much better than your typical plans and specs type project.
One of the things I really hated as an estimator was I hated going to bid meetings where they invited 45 low voltage contractors.
Yeah. All of your competitors are there, right?
It's right. Like the only way you can win that kind of job is you have to miss something in the bid.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And you have to kind of go into those types of bids knowing that you're going to make it up in change orders. There used to be a meme years ago floating around that was a picture of a large boat. Yeah. And the name on the back of the boat was change order, and the dinghy was original contractor. Mm-hmm. And that's been sort of this ongoing joke for years. And the sad part is how much of that is actually true. And my approach or our approach with our customer base is to talk about it straight up. Here's the situation. Here's why you want to be design build. You want somebody who's going to protect your interests, not just from the design phase, but all the way through to warranty. Mm-hmm. You want somebody who's going to be there throughout the whole process. And that's what design build brings. That's one of many things that design build brings from a customer's perspective. There is sort of a spectrum there, though, right? We've talked about the two ends, and there is sort of a spectrum, and there's something that's been happening a lot lately in the kind of the overall construction business, and more than just in the ICT, and that is that there's this sort of off-ramp that contractors and customers can agree to ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
It says, hey, listen, there's going to come a point where we may have to say that we either have to put the project on hold or maybe we have to go in a different direction. So a lot of times we'll work with them to come up with a full design build package, but really only award the design up front. We're still working 1,000% as if it's a full design build. But you get to the end of that design. I've completed the permit set. Everything's good to go. The very next step would be procurement and installation. But that's sort of the off-ramp point. And that's a hybrid that a lot of customers that are in a condition where they need that's worked out for them.
Yeah, and what I would recommend, because I've been in that position before. If from a contractor's perspective, if you're doing a design build, and the customer, and you're getting the feeling that the customer is going to want to separate the design from the build for whatever reason. I can come up with 20 reasons off the top of my head, but for whatever reason, they decide they want to separate them. If this is not a customer that you have a good established working relationship with, you might want to make sure that you protect your design somehow, i.e., say, hey, this design's free if provided we get the awarded the work. If we don't get awarded work, then the cost for this design is X, Y, Z value. Because I've had issues before where we've done designs for customers, and then 6 months down the road, they didn't even invite us to the bid. They put it out to bid, and somebody else got awarded. We're like, wait a minute, hello, we designed it.
Yeah. We call that speculative work, yes. Where we might be doing something on spec, or sort of investing into the project on spec, expecting that we're going to win, but knowing that it isn't guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And so we will work something out with a customer up front that says, hey, listen, if that's the condition we're in, let's work through what that looks like and talk about honestly and openly about what the end of that is. What we cannot do is even small companies, right? And I'm not pretending Power Design's some small company, but a lot of people watching this might be in a condition where they can't really afford to do that. Can't afford to just spend weeks of time on a design only to never hear from the project again.
Right.
So, and not that we can afford that either, right? Don't get me wrong, but you do have to protect your interests there, and you do have to put something in place, and you have to sort of identify upfront what your risks are and find ways to mitigate them. And the number one way is open, honest communication with the customer that says, hey, listen, you're asking me to basically lay out all the funds out there. You wanted me to fund this project for you. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, here's the things I need. Here are the assurances and the guarantees, and here's our off-ramp, and here's how much it's going to cost if you choose to do something else. That's certainly one way to do it.
So you recommend that we communicate with the customer? What do you think? We're in the communications industry?
Listen, I know it sounds wild, but it actually works.
It does? Crazy. It works? It works when you communicate?
As long as you're good at it. Like if you're not so good at it,
right.
Maybe not, right? They talk about practice makes perfect. It's not true. Perfect practice makes perfect. And sometimes you have to, be good at something to be successful with it. And sometimes bad communication is more hurtful than anything else. So know what your risks are all the time, right? Always be mitigating that. And from a, self-improvement perspective, if you know you're not great, or you're sort of starting to figure out, hey, listen, sometimes I'm getting not the reaction I wanted. That's something to improve on. We're way off topic, but listen, communication with your customer in a design build is the absolute number one key to success, and it is also the absolute number one key to failure.
That's why I have a list of 147 pro tips on my website, and that's why communications is not pro tip number one. It's actually pro tip number two. Pro tip number one on my list is document. Yeah. Because it's better to document a poor conversation than to have a good conversation, have something go wrong later on. So.
Yeah, for sure.
And now a message from our sponsor.
Big or small, local or nationwide, Fortress Telecom is your go-to partner for all your connectivity needs. With our expertise in low-voltage cabling, bidirectional Tier 2 fiber certification, copper certification up to Cat 8, and Wi-Fi site surveys using Ekahau Sidekick, there's no project too challenging for us. Count on Fortress Telecom to deliver top-notch solutions tailored to your business, wherever you are across the nation. Visit fortresstelecom.com or call us today to start your seamless connectivity journey. Fortress Telecom. We are secure IT. Let's get back to the show.
Can you describe the typical roles and responsibilities that a design build team might have for a low voltage project?
Yeah, the roles really aren't any different than in a plans and specs job. You still have designers and BIM techs, and you have project managers and field staff, and you have installers, and you have service, like all of those roles are still there. The responsibility is where things vary. I now become responsible for everything. I now own design from day one through warranty completion. I don't just own the installation of somebody else's design. From a roles perspective, it really is the same. You're still producing documentation. You're still communicating with your customer. You're still performing all of the functions that are required for a successful project. But now I am pre-construction. I now have total responsibility.
We talked about one of the benefits already of a design build company, the one point of contact all the way through the project. What are some other key benefits from a customer's perspective, why they should choose a design build contractor?
There's an old saying out there about having one throat to choke. I prefer to think of it as one back to pat. That, when from a customer's perspective, they're not having to hunt people down. They don't have to go, now wait a minute, my AV guy was this person, and my structured cabling person was this person. Who's the lighting controls? And none of that. You avoid all of that. And ultimately, you avoid this. You avoid your consultant documented it this way, and I did this, and then the consultant shows up and says, well, no, you're interpreting those words wrong. Well, raise your hand if you've never been in a situation where a consultant and a contractor interpreted the exact same phrase exactly the opposite way. All hands down, right? This happens to everyone everywhere. And there is none of that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I always tell people words have meanings. Choose your words carefully.
Exactly right.
And I learned that from being an estimator, because, if you misinterpret, I'll give you a simple, easy one: should versus shall.
Yeah, that
could be a difference between you making money on a project or you going into red on a project.
Yeah,
just because of interpreting one word wrong, and that's the most common one. There's lots of other ones too. I had a
we don't want to become lawyers, right? That's the last thing as small business owners or as designers or as the last thing we want to do is become lawyers. But you sort of have to. At some point, you have to understand the language that you're speaking with your customer, and understand that if worst comes to worst, and we all hope it never does, and you're standing in that courtroom and the judge starts asking questions, how's that person going to interpret those words? You don't want to get there, trust me, but if you think about that in advance and think about from the customer's perspective as you're writing your contract, things tend to fix themselves.
That's why I'm such a stickler. Our industry, we have multiple names for multiple things, right? The MDF, the IDF versus the TR. Some people, that actually name has actually changed a couple times. It used to be IDFs, independent distribution frame. Then it went to TC, telecom closet, and for a few years, and then it changed to telecom room. And the thing is, when you talk to 5 different people, you'll hear everybody using the different acronyms and different words. And that's why I tell people it's critical that you use the most current version, and you make sure that the person you're talking to, if somebody else uses the other one, that you clarify it to make sure that you're both talking about the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's when you get involved in these project meetings with all of the different disciplines and trades, and the architect is there, a lot of times, some of these architects, they're just not keeping up with anything. And so they'll use phraseology that maybe is out of date and might mean something wholly different today,
Right.
or might mean something wholly different to the interior designer than it does to the technical designer. So you have this break, and you do have to stop and say, time out. This is what that means to me. What does that mean to you? And get that clarified up front so that you just avoid that confusion in the future.
And get it documented too as well.
Yeah. That's exactly right. We talked about, sort of from the customer's perspective, some of the benefits as a business owner, as a contractor. The benefits of design build are, I think, bigger than from the perspective of the customer. I'm now no longer in a competitive situation. And I got myself there by building trust. So I'm not going to go breaking that trust by, driving costs up necessarily. But now I've worked my way and gotten into a position where I'm now a trusted partner with this customer. I'm now a trusted partner on a design team with other trades who may also need your services. I can't begin to tell you how many times architects have pulled us into projects, and we have been awarded design projects that are in parts of the country we don't build. So these became just design only projects for us. They're in the dozens just in the past year, just from working with architects who said, man, you guys really understand your stuff. You keep your customers' interests protected. You protect our interests too. Let's pull you into these projects. And now you suddenly have exposure to so much more. And that's just you go from being just another trade on the job site to an integrated partner in that project. You now have so much more exposure and so much more opportunity as a contractor than you would have as just another trade.
It's a mutually beneficial relationship, whether it's the low voltage contractor to customer or low voltage contractor to the electrical contractor. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. And the minute it quits being beneficial, there's going to be problems. And if you have that good working relationship, like you said, your profit margins aren't as tight,
Right.
because they perceive you as being better than average than the average low voltage contractor. And there are customers out there willing to pay extra for a better contractor just so they don't have the headaches.
Absolutely. Not everybody is a low bid customer. Yes, for sure. There's customers out there that only are concerned with the cost. Get it. Totally understand that those are out there. And there's opportunity in that too. But, for us, our preferred customer is not necessarily the person who's just looking to drive their cost down. They're looking for a quality product with quality partners and looking to build a project that everybody can be proud of at the end.
Because I deal in a lot of low voltage social media platforms and different groups and stuff, and I hear this quite often. Somebody will post a picture of their work, and other low voltage techs will critique it. And quite often, one of the things you'll hear them say is, well, why didn't you put up a piece of plywood, or why didn't you use horizontal wire managers? And usually the response is, well, the customer didn't want to pay for it. Okay, there's two avenues you can take there. The first avenue is educate the customer and let them understand why that's an important thing to have, whether it's horizontal wire management or plywood, or fire the customer. You don't have to work for every customer comes to you and says you want to do work for you. When I used to work for Hinkles and McCoy many years ago, and we had a very large, nationally well-known company, one of the largest companies in the United States that we were doing work for across the United States. And we eventually just said, yeah, we're done. No more. Because they would just nickel and dime everything. That's just that's just if the customer doesn't realize it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and you don't realize it's a mutually beneficial relationship, it's time to move on. It's time to move on.
And listen, I will tell you, customers will respect you for saying, hey, listen, this isn't working. This is mutually not working out.
Yes.
I'm losing money. You don't want me to lose money. You're not getting the product that I think you should be getting, and none of us can really be proud of this going forward. Let's finish, what we've got. We're going to give you the best that we can, and then let's maybe reconsider other projects in the future. There's absolutely adult professional ways to go about that.
Yes.
It's not the easiest thing in the world to say no to a customer. It's really, really hard, but sometimes it's the right thing to do.
But you know what, the customer, if you go to the customer and you explain to them, and they might go, oh, well, we've never considered that.
Yeah.
And then they might change their mind. So that's where that whole communications word comes into
Right.
play. Right? Communicate. So what kind of challenges might a team might face when they're adopting the design build model, and how can those be mitigated?
So your biggest challenge, I think, is going to be the potential financial risk and mitigating that. You have to start to look at it and say, okay, where are some things where I could really get in trouble here? Start identifying those red flags or those risk, the key risks,
Mm-hmm.
and put things in place. What are some of those things? If you go back and compare this to a traditional contract, where if all I did was bid on somebody else's design, what's the first thing I'm going to do when I run into a problem? I'm going to point at the customer and say, well, the documentation you gave me was missing X, Y, and Z, so you're going to have to pay me to do that X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Well, I can't do that anymore. So there's a financial risk here that if I'm the one who missed the X, Y, Z, I own it. I told the customer I'm giving him a complete and total turnkey package. But if I missed it and it's not turnkey anymore, it's on me to figure out. That's a huge risk. So how do you mitigate that? Be thorough, be complete, be accurate, be on your game. Make sure that everything you do, to your point, is documented thoroughly. Make sure that your drawings are absolutely right.
Yep.
Do people make mistakes? Absolutely.
Yeah, make sure you're current with the best practices, the codes, the standards.
Exactly right.
Not only be current with what's in them,
Yep.
but know what the nomenclature is for them. And I'll tell you why. And I don't want to talk bad about architects, but they're not low voltage experts. So a lot of times they will copy and paste verbiage from a previous document and paste it in a new thing, and they're referencing a standard that might be 2 versions old.
Absolutely. And worse than that, sometimes they get into life safety things where they're referencing codes in the wrong part of the country, where you can't do that. I can do this over in this part of the country, but I can't do this here. If you the kind of person who just takes blocks of information and reuses it over and over again and calls it a new project, you're opening yourself up to a lot of risk. You need to make sure that you are validating that every part of your design is absolutely thorough. You do not want to get yourself in a situation where you're the one who you have to point to say, well, the designer, that's me, I missed some stuff, so I got to pay for it.
Right.
You want to avoid that, because not only is it costing you profitability on the job, but it's costing you credibility with your customer, because if you think they don't know it, they absolutely do. You cannot get yourself in a situation where you're unprofitable and you've lost credibility. You're not getting job number 2 out of that. And, if you're a football nerd like I am, there's something Brady used to say all the time, what's your favorite ring? And his answer was always the next one, right? And I sort of have that mentality with projects with my customers. I want that next job with them. I love the job we have, and we're going to make sure we get the best thing out the door. But the next one with that same customer is just as important. It's going to be my new favorite. It's the reason why we rarely have one job customers. Rarely, and I do mean rarely. I can think of maybe one customer in the last 10 plus years that we only did one project with.
Because once you get a good working relationship with a customer like that, and they keep coming back to you,
Yep.
You're not sitting in that bid meeting with 45 other people. And again, there's more
Yep.
profit in that. There absolutely is.
Yep. There's opportunity in that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely is, and there's value there, and that's what you're really charging for, right? You're not charging for the cable and the jacks and the team. You're really charging the customer for the value. You got to find what was that they value, and that's what they're really paying for. Because you can always find a contractor that'll just they'll put in a category 5E cable for $110. but
Right.
they're not going to be doing any design work for you. They may not even be around when that Cat 5e cable doesn't work right.
That's exactly right.
And
And that's the low bid customer they have to be concerned with. They couldn't care less if you're going to be around later. That's not their problem. They'll find somebody who is.
and there are customers out there that will bank on that. They will know that architect copied a standard from a couple of revisions ago. They're just going to let it fly because they don't really care about the contractor. They're going to say, bid it, and then when you bid it, okay, you're locked in now. Oh, but wait a minute, it referred to an old. You already signed the contract. You got to do it.
You told me based on this contract that you were going to install a code compliant project regardless of mistakes or omissions. Well,
Yeah.
Now what?
And there's again, that's the kind of customer you don't want because they don't value that relationship.
No,
they just don't.
Really don't want that.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, we're taking a quick break to talk about an essential resource for anyone interested in the vast world of physical security. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, you'll want to tune into Security Today. Hosted by Bear, this podcast dives deep into everything security related, from insightful articles and thought-provoking philosophies to the latest trending topics in the industry. Every episode of Security Today is packed with information that's crucial for staying informed and ahead in the field. Join Bear as he explores complex topics with ease, making even the most intricate security concepts accessible to everyone. Follow the journey on Instagram and Twitter at UncleBear_ and at Security Today Podcast. Now let's dive back into our episode.
Can you share a success story or a case study where your design build model significantly benefited a low voltage project?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I'll go back a number of years, I think before the progressive design build concept existed. We came across a customer back in the late 90s, early 2000s, who the only thing they did was plans and specs. We approached them with a design build model. They were a little uncomfortable with it, so we sort of invented on the fly this, well, here's your total design build price, but we're just going to hold you responsible for the design part now. We'll do the build part later. We developed that relationship with them. And ultimately, over the course of, I think about 4 years, we ended up deploying somewhere a little north of 600 conference rooms in 3 different places across the country. And their reporting to us is that our feedback to them during the design process and helping them to come up with standards and helping to define new physical spaces that they hadn't thought of before saved them millions and millions of dollars just in construction costs alone. When they previously were treating these things as entirely separate spaces, and we said, why? Let's talk about combining them, right? The technology money that they saved is unreal too, but the construction money they saved is millions and millions and millions of dollars. On top of the process savings, when their people were not having to hunt down bids from every qualified contractor they could find in the phone book, they were able to kind of develop this relationship with us, and the expediency and how quickly and how efficiently we were able to deploy these massive conference rooms all over the country with standards that were sort of invented during the design process that are used today, by the way. Fast forward all these years, that customer is still deploying those same standards today. In my book, that's a huge success story, right?
Yes.
More recently, and within PDI, Power Design, we recently finished a project in South Florida that was huge, somewhere close to 2 million square feet, a couple of 50 some odd story towers full of extremely expensive, very high-end resi condos with some absolutely wild amenity spaces, right? The only trade in the entire project that was design build was technology. Everything else was a more traditional model. By the end of the project, what started out as about a $9 or so million technology package ended up being about 23, 24 million, somewhere in that ballpark.
Wow.
And not one single dollar of that was contractor driven change. Every single change from start to finish was customer driven change. And ultimately that wasn't the goal, right? The goal was no changes. This is it. This is what we're doing. This is what we're going to deploy. And as we got into it and the relationship with them, we would, they trusted us to have those conversations with them about expanding some ideas and some concepts and coming up with different things that nobody had really thought of 3 or 4 years ago at the start of the project, when then 3 or 4 years into the project, now this is an idea they want to start looking at. They trusted us to deploy that and protect their interests at the same time, right? At the end of it, it sounds like this huge number, and the customers have estimated with us that they think they probably saved somewhere in the $4.5 to $5 million based on our processes that we used throughout that to avoid delays, avoid the bidding process, avoid the risk that comes with having to manage 5, 6, 7 different contractors or different disciplines throughout that lifespan.
Great points. Absolutely great points. A large portion of my audience are people they've been low voltage installers or technicians, and now they're venturing out on their own. They got their own little operation. It might be just them or 1 or 2 other people, right? Starting off with business brand new. What skills or knowledge would you recommend they focus on or developing to maybe shift to a design build?
So we started out talking about communication, right? And absolutely key number 1 is the ability to communicate well, and not just talk about the technology, but you've got to understand their business, right? And get to know your customer and get to know their business. Understand how the decisions that you make about the products that are being used, about the topology of the design, how that affects their business. How does it affect their resale value? Understanding things like, hey, if I convince you to use a product line or a technology that requires ongoing recurring fees, how does that affect your ability to resell that building? If that building's core functionality is based on having to continue to pay this manufacturer for these licenses every year or every month, what does that do to the resale value of that building? Does my customer care about resale value, or do they keep the building? Understanding that and being willing to have those conversations. Customers care about the technology. They much, to the dismay of a lot of people, they actually do care about the tech. What they don't care about is the weedy details that we care about. The stuff that gets us excited, they just don't care, right? The newest, coolest way to crimp a category cable, they just don't care.
Right? Pass through traditional keystone patch panel or traditional flat patch panel. Stuff that we all argue.
If I never again get into an argument about pass through, I'll be perfectly fine.
I don't understand why people argue with that. Pass through connectors are a great connector as long as you're using. And I've had Simply RJ45 on the show. We talked about it. I've had an engineer from a manufacturer on the show. We've talked about it. Says as long as you maintain your crimper, it's a viable connection. I understand why older installers frown upon them, because they taught how to do the old way, the traditional style ones, and I get that, because that's what we drive our comfort from. And these new young whippersnappers, it's so easy. I used to have to walk uphill both ways in the snow to go to school. I get those arguments. But listen, it's a viable way of doing stuff, and we argue over some of the stupidest things sometimes.
No doubt. Look, 10 years ago, if you were to talk about how many electric cars are on the street today, all the gas engine guys would lose their minds. What are you doing? You're crazy. That stuff doesn't work, right? Once you love a thing, it's hard to let that thing go, or it's hard to imagine that there's a better version of it.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, though: if you approach it with an open mind, be willing to listen to the other person's point of view. I'm not necessarily saying agree with it, but just listen to it. Listen to hear, not listen to respond. Listen to hear it. You'd be surprised how much it'll broaden your own perspective on stuff. Just listening to other people and trying to see from their point of view. As an instructor, I see this all the time. I would have a student come up and test questions. You would think they're simple to write. I've written many test questions before, and I've had people come up who've taken my test and they answered it wrong. And they go, and when they explain their thought process, I'm like, I can see how you got there. But you have to have that. You have to have that open mind. Last week's show, I had Bob Hertling on the show. He was the subject matter expert team lead for the 15th edition of the TDMM, and we talked about all the new things in the TDMM, like fault managed power systems, single pair Ethernet, all new stuff coming into our industry. So, what role does this new technology have in influencing the design build model for the low voltage?
Well, I think as one of the things you and I have talked about a little bit, you've been in this business a minute, and back in, let's say, the 90s, there was a huge push towards this idea of convergence, and it's a word I learned to hate. If I never saw the word convergence again, I'd have been perfectly fine. But truly what has happened over time is that all of these subsystems that we call technology across the scope of a building, all of these subsystems have that the technology that's used to make those things work have really started to look like the same thing. The topology of AV today doesn't look anything like it did.
No, it doesn't. It does not even look the same.
Security doesn't look anything like it did 5 years ago. All of these scopes have wildly changed. Being able to take advantage of that fact will drive a customer to you to say, listen, I understand all of how these scopes work. I understand the interconnectivity. I understand what works and what doesn't. And I can save you, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, money by saying, listen, let's have a shared infrastructure, for example. There's no reason that these all have to be separate standalone risers up a building. Why in the world are we still doing that?
Right.
There's a lot of opportunity as the technology continues to sort of do this, right? It becomes sort of the same core thing. We take advantage of that and we go to our customer instead of waiting for the customer to go to consultants who may or may not be on board with the idea, who aren't necessarily interested in trying to find the most cost-effective way for the customer to get it done. But as a contractor trying to win the award, I'm interested in making sure that customer finds the most cost-effective way to get BAS, lighting controls, AV, Wi-Fi, and everything sort of on the same
page
network,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And on top of that, we were talking a few minutes ago about what are some of the skills that you need to learn. There's the technology part of that we just talked about. There's also understanding the business part. The skill set of understanding how the business flows and how these projects flow and being able to produce that level of documentation that your customer expects to be able to take all of these subsystems and make them one. That skill set and that knowledge and trying to drive that merge will open up huge opportunities. And your customer starts to see and understand and recognize the value that you're bringing to them. So they start to see the value in design build because they're no longer seeing that value from 3 different consultants, none of them working together, none of them providing the same thing, and none of them really working toward a lower cost solution. So that's, to me, when you start looking at that, then you also have to start looking at the business process and start looking at things like smart analytics and understanding the step-by-step process, right? And looking at what all the other trades are doing and how do I integrate into that trade. If my interior designer and the architect and my landscape guy, who I have to integrate with all of those things, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, I have to understand all of it. If they're all in Revit and I'm over here in whatever, right, SketchUp or something else, I'm in trouble. I'm now left behind. I got to get caught up and I've got to get into the world that they're in.
Right.
Stop sending PDFs to people of the thing that you napkin catted up. Look, AutoCAD was great, but it is nothing anymore,
No,
right?
it's not.
AutoCAD
Revit's the way to go
is
now.
darn near dead.
Yeah, Revit's the way to go.
But you have to recognize that and you have to see it and understand, well, how do I impact the project with that technology? How do I say to my customer, hey, everybody else is on Revit, but y'all are just going to have to bend to me sending you PDFs because I use Visio or whatever it is. You've got to get on board with what the entire construction industry is using.
Yes.
So that you can support that project and you can drive your customer to seeing the value in design build and seeing the value in you as their design build partner.
Yeah, I did a show about a year ago. A guy approached me about wanting to do a show about Revit. And I've been doing training now for like 13 years. So I'd never really dealt with Revit. I was like, Revit? Huh? What's that? And then when he explained it to me, he actually showed me, I was like, dude, where was this stuff when I was an estimator?
Yeah.
And so we did a show about that. And I get asked questions, this is probably the most common question I get about Revit. And maybe you might be able to answer. Where would somebody get training on how to use Revit?
So there are some local colleges across the country who teach Revit classes, and you walk out the door with a certification that you know this product and you know how to use this tool for just about every application. And what's great about these courses is that they cover everything from architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, technology, 3D, how to build a wheel with it, right? They cover sort of everything. And so while that's great, it doesn't really help. How do I now integrate that into how do I make wire diagrams in Revit? It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. In fact, it's not easier than AutoCAD. But how I show those devices in the field, how I show those devices in the project, right, in the building, where they go, some of the automation that can happen, they'll teach you that stuff. And that's the key thing is getting your head wrapped around how Revit works and then taking it and applying it in the way that worked best for you. That's what we've done. This company has darn near abandoned AutoCAD. It's not complete. That's hard to do. But the entire technology team has just about abandoned AutoCAD, electrical, mechanical, plumbing. We're all out of it. There's still some pieces that we had invested in AutoCAD, some automation that we had to home brew to make it work. So we still do it, but the automation that's built into Revit is amazing. And the fact that I can almost treat it as a, dare I say, AI environment where I can start just identifying some key things and it starts doing the back end processes for me and building some documentation for me that I no longer have to drop in a thing and draw a line and identify the thing and then do it again and then do it again and do it again and do it again 800 times. It's doing that for me. Mm-hmm. Pretty powerful stuff. And step one is go find that local class that'll do it.
Right. I never even thought about how AI would benefit that process. There's a fellow content creator. He's a network guy, network engineer guy. He said his content's really more about equipment, stuff like that. And him and I talk about AI all the time. And one of the things you hear from people in our industry is, well, AI is never going to pull a cable. AI is never going to terminate or test a cable. Well, it's okay. I got
Right.
you. I agree with that. But to the estimator who's coming up with a bill of materials, to the designer, like you just said, is doing the Revit and not having to do that repetitive motion for 800 times, AI is going to make them more efficient. And for those who don't know what Revit is, think of AutoCAD, but in 3D. So like if you, let's say, and the HVAC contractor sends a Revit file, the GC sends a file, the electrical sends a file, we send file. So if you pull up a room, like a telecom room, you can actually look and see, oh, wait a minute, my ladder rack it's going to be interfering. It's going to be the same level or hitting with the lights, which you may not easily catch that if you're looking at a set of prints.
That's exactly right. And that coordination, we talked before about being able to coordinate with all these other trades. That real-time live coordination where you can hop on the phone with the mechanical guy and say, hey, look where you have this going through the wall. did you not see that I have 4 2-inch, pipe running up the wall there? Oh man, totally missed that. Let's fix it, right? Hey, let's work through some issues. Let's get on the phone with electrical and see if we can't, in real time, move things around within the room to make our stuff work and be code compliant. Revit is maybe the most powerful tool that has come to the design part of this business in maybe my career. The efficiency that it brings, the ability to find mistakes. We do these things called clash detections, right, that you just talked about, and avoid that. Previously, the only way to avoid it was to have the sprinkler pipe hung in the ceiling, and then I'd start to go and go, hey, I can't drill a hole in that thing.
It's easier to make a change when it's a line on a piece of paper as opposed to actually a wall in the field.
That's exactly right. And so for us, it has proven to be wildly powerful for us to be able to increase efficiencies in the field, increase our communication with our customer, increase our communication and coordination with all the other trades to avoid problems on site. And avoiding problems on site is, after all, what we're trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. It's efficiency, it's profitability, it's your reputation in the field with your customer, with the other trades on site, trying to build to that next project, that next ring, if you will, that we want to go get that next job. Well, you're not going to do that if you're out there going, hey man, your stuff's in my way and I got to move it all, and you're hacking away somebody's sprinkler pipe. Not a good plan.
Work smarter, not harder.
Always.
Eric, what a fantastic show, my friend. When I talked to the guy, I can't remember the guy's name now because I've slept since then.
Squirrel. Mike, probably Mike. Yeah.
And he said, and I can't, because he approached me if I knew anybody in the area who might be looking for a job for you guys or something like that.
One of our recruiters.
And we got to talking, and I was like, dude, I need to get you guys on the show. And he says, I know just the person. He nailed it. He nailed it, man. Absolutely. Glad to have you on the show, Eric.
I really appreciate the time and look forward to it. Again, maybe in the future we've got lots to talk about for sure.
I'm always looking for content. So if you come up with a subject that you think that we need to talk about, reach out to me. You got my email address now.
Anything but pass-through connectors.
I'll even talk about pass-through connectors too. I mean, because there's this in the content creation world. Unfortunately, the quickest way to get a lot of downloads, views, impressions is to talk about something controversial. And I try not to do that, but there's a large segment out there that they want to do it one way, and it's out there. It just is. It is what it is.
It's the Mac versus IBM platform conversation from the 90s.
Remember those commercials? I used to love those commercials. And you know who's mimicking it now? Trend Networks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're mimicking those commercials now, and I think brilliant marketing strategy. Brilliant marketing strategy.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.